Welcome back for episode 15 of the Edwardo Series. Today is our last episode with Pastor Edwardo, and his final reason for why we don't keep the law of Moses is because
we have a different law to keep, the law of Christ.
Is that true? Is the law of Christ really a different law than the law of God given through Moses? We'll look at this a lot more after we hear what Pastor Edwardo has to say about it.
And finally, why don't we keep the law of Moses? Because we are under law to Christ. Some would follow us all through these first 14 points and then suggest that, we must not think we're under any law today. Since we're not under the law, we don't keep the law, then there must not be any law. Well, that's just not true. 1 Corinthians 9 and then verse 21. Paul said, not without law to God, but under what? The law of Christ. And so we're under law. We are under law to Christ. That's why in Galatians 6 and verse 2, Paul said, bear ye one another's burdens, and so fulfill what? The law of Christ. We're under law. The law of Christ.
Let's read that verse again. Galatians 6:2. Bear ye one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. Remember in episode 2, Pastor Edwardo said that
when Christ fulfilled the law, then it was no longer operative. And when all was fulfilled, it passed away.
To Pastor Edwardo, the word fulfill means to be over and done with. But here in Galatians 6:2, when talking about the law of Christ, he changes the definition of fulfill. We can't change the definition of words when dealing with the Word of God just to prove our own doctrine. Remember, fulfill means to do or to accomplish, to perform, not over and done with. Also, there are only 2 places in the whole Bible that mention this law of Christ or law to Christ, and neither one of those gives a definition of what the law of Christ is or what it entails. But it is interesting that in 1 Corinthians 9, the same chapter that mentions the law to Christ, Paul says this, who goeth a warfare any time at his own charges? Who planteth a vineyard and eateth not the fruit thereof? Or who feedeth a flock and eateth not the milk of the flock? Say I these things as a man? Or saith not the law also? For it is written in the law of Moses, thou shalt not muzzle the mouth of the ox that treadeth out the corn. Doth God take care for oxen? Or saith he it altogether for our sakes? For our sakes no doubt this is written, that he that ploweth should plow in hope, and he that thresheth in hope should be partaker of his hope. Paul says that the law of Moses was written for our sakes, because God cares for us. And now, 11 verses later in 1 Corinthians 9:21, you want to throw it away because
we have a different law to keep, the law of Christ.
This makes no sense. So what is the law of Christ? How is it different than the law of Moses? Some people would say that, now we just have to love God and love our neighbor, the 2 greatest commandments. Well, let's read what Jesus said about that. Matthew 22:35-40. Then one of them, which was a lawyer, asked him a question, tempting him and saying, Master, which is the great commandment in the law? Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment, and the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these 2 commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Jesus is quoting straight from the law of Moses, from Deuteronomy 6:5 and Leviticus 19:18. So this is nothing new. This can't be some new law of Christ that's different from the law of Moses. Well, in John 14:15, Jesus said, If ye love me, keep my commandments. So some would say that we no longer follow the commandments in the law of Moses, we follow Jesus' commandments. Okay then, Jesus told the healed leper in Matthew 8:4 to show thyself to the priest and offer the gift that Moses commanded. Jesus said in Luke 16:31, If they hear not Moses and the prophets, neither will they be persuaded, though one rose from the dead. And in Matthew 19:17, Jesus said, If thou wilt enter into life, keep the commandments, referencing the commandments that specifically come from the law of Moses. John 5:46 and 47, Jesus said, For had ye believed Moses, he would have believed me, for he wrote of me. But if ye believe not his writings, How shall ye believe my words? Jesus said in John 7:16 and 17, My doctrine is not mine, but his that sent me. If any man will do his will, he shall know of the doctrine, whether it be of God, or whether I speak of myself. How do we know if Jesus' doctrine is of God? If we search the scriptures to see if what Jesus said lines up with the law and the prophets. And think about this. If Jesus came to do away with the law and turn us away from the commandments that God gave through Moses, that will make him a false prophet. Look at Deuteronomy 13:1-5. If there arise among you a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, and giveth thee a sign or a wonder, and the sign or the wonder come to pass, whereof he spake unto thee, saying, Let us go after other gods which thou hast not known, and let us serve them, thou shalt not hearken unto the words of that prophet, or that dreamer of dreams. For the Lord your God proveth you, to know whether ye love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. Ye shall walk after the Lord your God, and fear him, and keep his commandments, and obey his voice, and ye shall serve him, and cleave unto him. And that prophet or that dreamer of dreams shall be put to death, because he hath spoken to turn you away from the Lord your God, which brought you out of the land of Egypt, and redeemed you out of the house of bondage, to thrust thee out of the way which the Lord thy God commanded thee to walk in. So shalt thou put the evil away from the midst of thee. Of course, Jesus wasn't a false prophet, but this is what you might call a consequence to thinking that Jesus came to do away with the law of God.
Why don't we keep the law of Moses? Because we have a different law to keep. 15 reasons as to why we don't keep the law of Moses.
15 reasons, if we put them back in context, if we search the scriptures to find out just what Jesus and the apostles are really talking about, are 15 reasons that can be turned around and used to prove that we actually should keep the law of Moses. Every one of Pastor Edwardo's verses and proofs for why we don't keep the law of Moses is out of context or lacks a proper understanding and comparison of the scriptures. And this kind of theology doesn't even consider all the good things that God wrote for us in the law. In Hosea 8:12, God says, I have written to him the great things of my law, but they were counted as a strange thing. Pastor Edwardo fails to consider that when Paul talks about the law, he could be speaking about another law, the law of sin, or the law of the husband, and not just the law of God given through Moses, all of which must be determined by context. And since, as we've seen in this episode through searching the scriptures, that the law of Christ contains the very same commands as the law of Moses, and since Jesus wouldn't command of us anything opposite or contradictory to what the Father commanded, that's why we do keep the law of Moses.
Because we are under law to Christ. Because we have a different law to keep. The law of Christ. 15 reasons as to why we don't keep the law of Moses.
Hi everyone. If you have a reason or a verse for why we should not keep the law of God given through Moses, leave it in the comments section below, and I'll try to answer it biblically in a bonus 16th episode at the end of this series. Thanks for watching.